In this video, we're going to talk about interaction design. Interaction design is thinking about how a user will interact with something, whether it's a website or application, because how we interact with something impacts our experience and impacts our learning. So we'll talk about some basics, and then I'll show you some examples. So here's basics. Just like any visual design for learning, we want to keep it clear, simple, and consistent. We want it to be very clear what the user is looking at, keep it as simple and easy as possible to reduce cognitive load, and then consistent. I need to know that when I see underlined text, that means it's going to be a link. If there's underlined text that's not a link, that might confuse me. Okay, so that's what we mean by consistent here. The web page or the application responds in consistent ways. So this is from Gilligan Crampton Smith, 5 Dimensions of Interaction Experience Design. These are all areas you can think about when you're designing something for interaction. Think about the words you use. What's representing what? What are the visuals? And do people understand what those visuals are? How are you using physical objects in space, including on a screen? How's time used? And what is the behavior the user should use and the behavior that the interface or the website should do in response to the user behavior? So here's some just random examples of good and bad design. Here we have a nice elevator that is just not understandable. It's not consistent. We're lacking so much consistency with the different sizes of buttons. And finding what floor you want is a lot more difficult on this than if it was just more orderly. Here's another example of a door. It says pull, and it looks like a push door, right? There's not even a pull handle. So that's another inconsistency. Sometimes we end up with websites that look like this, that they're not clear and they're overwhelming. You see all the different fonts and text, and I don't even know where to click and go. I guess maybe to the index page? I'm not sure. Here's another where it's just very confusing and inconsistent because there's 1 hour parking, no parking, tow away, there's different times. So that lack of consistency is incredibly confusing. This is Lenny Kravitz's website. The challenge with this is it's just hard to read. So the colors they used and the fonts they used, this is a nice image. This is a consistent thing people use to designate that there's a menu, but the words themselves are just very difficult. So when we create something, the user needs to know what to do, what will happen when they do that. And then if they get an error, they need to know what to do then, how to fix any errors they get. So these images are from uxpin.com, these GIFs, and they just show some nice examples of user interaction. So when you see a bullet list right here, it's really clear that you're supposed to click one of the circles. If there was a square, convention says that would be a check mark where you can check many. That's just a convention we've built up, so we remain consistent across platforms so people know how to interact with websites and forums and such. Here's another thing, trying to keep the appearance of buttons and images really consistent. So that's good to do with a template and setting that up ahead of time so things stay the same. We also have drop-down lists like this. These are all consistent elements that suggest how users might interact with something, and they're built on kind of a common vocabulary or usage that we've built up around how we design websites and other applications. We need to know what's going to happen if we click something. So I need to know right here, when I click create your store, I need to know that's what that button does. So writing a very specific response here helps me know what's going to happen. You could just have submit here, but this is more descriptive of what it is. This is safe driving mode in Zoom a few years ago, where it's very clear that you're supposed to tap to speak. I do have to note that I am not a huge fan of Zoom's mobile tool. At least I haven't used it for a couple of years, but I used to actually get confused when I was muted or not, and I think it's because of this thing right here and the way this changes colors. But at least it's really clear what to do. The next thing is to know, how do I know what my mistake is? So if I get something that like just says check it out, like I don't know, check what out. We want it so that if someone gets some type of error, they know what to do. It's very specific. So if I just get unsupported image type, that is actually more knowledge than just this is an error. It says I need to think about the type of my image. So that's a more direct type of description about what my mistake is. Another thing that's interesting is knowing what the computer's doing. So if it's taking a long time loading, if you don't see any movement, it can get really impatient and you can want to just click. So they've created these bars that show you what it's doing to increase patience. And there's actually some interesting studies around the impact that has on humans. I listened to an interesting podcast on it once. And then just making sure it's easy to interact with. So right here, if this is mobile, being able to close these X's, they're very small. And I'm very often to accidentally click the wrong button, whereas these X's are much bigger. So you want to make sure that it's very clear and easy to, things are the appropriate size and that it's clear what I'm supposed to do and how to close them. Another thing about making things easy to understand is sometimes there's things called tooltips right here, if you see that eye. And when you hover over it with your mouse, it tells you more about it. What that does is it makes it so you don't have to add tons of text to something. It's only there on demand if the user needs it. So it keeps your website clear, but it also makes it so they can get extra information if they need to. This is just a confusing, I don't know what this is. Not very easy to understand. Maybe if you knew the website you could, but all these things are quite confusing. All right, now we're going to talk about using affordances to enhance understanding for what users are supposed to do. So affordance is properties of an object which show users the actions they can take. Or you can think of it as what something suggests you should do. So for example, when you see a car door, it's generally easy to know what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to pull it, right? That's partly because we've learned over time. I tried to get into my brother's car the other day. He has a new Tesla, and it actually took me a minute to figure out how to get in and out. I think that's partly lack of experience with that car door, but eventually, hopefully, you're able to learn pretty quickly. Here's a really good example. Slide to unlock. It even has an arrow here, and it changes the color of the font as you slide it. That really suggests what you're supposed to do. We've also looked at the examples of different colors where you have sharps and highlights and markers. They each serve different purposes, and we learn what to do with them based on how we interact with them and what they show. Here's some bad examples. This is kind of a famous problem with a voting ballot where knowing like which, because there's a line here that matches up with the circle, but then the 5 and the arrows here, it's very confusing. And so there's actually been some pretty big problems with elections because of user error. They don't know if users actually selected what they meant to select. Here's another one. We have the same type of door for push and pull. Doors are classic for having poor affordances. It should be, it's kind of strange that we have to put directions on a door. We'd hope that we could design a door well enough that we wouldn't need directions on how to open a door, but that's what happens. Polish, we never know what to do. You sit there watching people do it because they're not designed very well. These examples are from Envision app. So this makes it really easy to split the bill the way that it's designed, and it lets you move things around. It's a very nice affordance of these types of sliding bars and movement. Here's another where when you choose something, you click it and it goes right into that cart here. And that connects the digital with the visual so that we understand what's happening and we can see really clearly what's in our bag. I actually really like this example. Here's another where recommended being able to see different colors of something really easy is nice to be able to easily interact and see what you're supposed to do. Here's customizing something where It's easy to select what kind of things you want to customize. So these are all examples of designs that people just use easily. Here's one more. Choosing what you want to do. These are just different interactions that we have found that work really well for people. So when you use an app or a website that you're like, that was really easy, it's because they use the affordances of a slider or an enlargement or a color change to show the user what to do. So takeaways, web design and user interaction design follow the same principles as visual design. Keep it clear, simple, and consistent. And then we want to use the affordances of a tool to enhance understanding. Thanks for watching.